Everyone to Broadband Breakfast live online for Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. Closing in on the last couple weeks of the year. Happy holidays to everyone. We have a real treat for you today. But before we get to our program, I want to just tell you a little bit about what's going on at Broadband Breakfast over this holiday season. We've got a great program today, which I'll get to shortly. Next week on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about telehealth and robots. So nothing like the holiday season to talk about robots and telehealth, the family, making sure broadband connectivity achieves all of its purposes. On the 28th, 2 weeks from today, we're gonna have several journalists in the broadband and tech world talk and recap the biggest stories of broadband in 2022 with an eye towards 2023. And then on January 4th, we will be live in Las Vegas with looking forward to the year ahead in 2023. As I said at the top, we are all about better broadband, better lives. We bring people together in a community around these purposes, and we publish news every business day focused on these topics. We couldn't do our reporting and our events, our free events every Wednesday without our sponsors. We're grateful for all of them. They include Utopia Fiber, Broadband Money, Google Fiber, Lightbox, Wireless Infrastructure Association, Geo Partners LLC, Ookla, Michael Baker International, Pinpoint Capital Advisors, Bitstream Communications Inc., Positron Access, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and BroadbandToolkit.com. Again, we thank our sponsors, which enable us to do this free programming every week. We also recently had, just about 4 weeks ago, week before Thanksgiving, we had Digital Infrastructure Investment. Now, this is a conference we've done before. We've done it actually 3 times before. This was our 4th. We did it as a freestanding event at Clyde's of Gallery Place. We felt a great conference with a lot of value for those who came and attended. If you missed it, we still have videos, complete, good quality. Some minor glitches on the one audio, but all of them very good videos, and the content was exceptional. So those videos are available as part of our Broadband Breakfast Club. This is something we've just relaunched it, and it is a monthly subscription, a monthly membership to be part of the Broadband Breakfast Club. You get 4 key things. You get exclusive access to our signature course on digital infrastructure. You get a monthly consulting, 2 hours of free consulting coaching. You get exclusive monthly report on broadband developments. And we've got a great report for the month of December on the 12 days of broadband. Hang on one second, I'll get to that. And of course, video from our events, including Digital Infrastructure Investment, which we just concluded, and conferences we'll be announcing shortly for 2023. Speaking of which, the 12 days of broadband. So I keyed this up last week. We've been continuing, and we look forward this week to releasing this report to our Broadband Breakfast Club members and those who seek to join. The 12 days of broadband, I just got to get to the page, and I will get to it now. So we're talking about the 12 business days from December 1 till December 16th. The first day of broadband, my true love sent to me a symmetrical gigabit network. On the second day of broadband, my true love sent to me 24 reverse preemption pole attachment states. On the third day of broadband, my true love sent to me Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Each of these days of broadband correlate to our 12 top stories for the year in broadband. And the exclusive report that will be available this week will cover all 12 of these stories in a great synthesis of the year's top stories. The fourth day of broadband, my true love sent to me $42.5 billion in the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Funds. The fifth day of broadband, my true love sent to me 5 federal communications commissioners, right? I mean, that's really a big issue, because we may indeed get 5 commissioners if the lame duck achieves some of its purposes. The 6th day of broadband, my true love sent to me Wi-Fi 6E. On the seventh day of broadband, my true love sent to me a 7.7% annual inflation rate, which is not necessarily a good thing, but that's the reality. And that's affected a lot about broadband in the past year. The eighth day of broadband, my true love sent to me 8,132,968 census blocks and a national broadband fabric, right? And that's obviously been a big point of discussion. Just two more, folks. The ninth day of broadband, my true love sent to me $9 billion in the Universal Service Fund. And the 10th day of broadband, my true love sent to me more than $10 billion remaining in the Affordable Connectivity Program. There's 2 more days, but you'll have to wait to tomorrow and the next day to find out what those days are and the stories that are associated with them. I encourage you to go to broadbandbreakfast.com/club, or just go to Breakfast Club at the top left corner of Broadband Breakfast to find out more about the Broadband Breakfast Club. And the final thing I want to mention is that if you attended Digital Infrastructure Investment, you'll get 2 complimentary months of access to the Broadband Breakfast Club, or if you attended any of our other paid events, 2 complimentary months of access. But from now until January 4th, 3 weeks from today, or another 12 business days after the first 12, we are offering a special offer that you can join the Broadband Breakfast Club for $60 a month and lock in your rate going forward into 2023 and beyond. Instead of the $99, you'll get access to all of this content for just $60 a month. All right. With that, let's go ahead and turn to our panel. We do have a great group of people who are joining us. And our topic, which I haven't introduced yet, is getting better broadband to multiple dwelling units, or MDUs. And there's actually a kind of a great line we had, which was in the trenches, building better broadband for multi-dwelling units. And actually, and you'll see this in the page for this event, which I'll send in the chat window in just a moment, a great expert opinion piece that Pierre Trudeau, the president and CTO of Positron Access Solutions, wrote about lessons learned in deploying broadband in MDUs. And we're going to hear from Pierre just now to kick off this discussion. Pierre Trudeau, a little bit about him. He's the former Prime Minister of Canada. Oh, no, sorry, a different Pierre Trudeau. This Pierre Trudeau is president and CEO of Positron Access Solutions and a seasoned networking and technology executive with more than 30 years of experience. He founded Colobris Networks, a leader in advanced Wi-Fi solutions for wireless ISP, carrier, and enterprises, and he provided business and technology services to several companies until he joined Positron Access. It looks like 9 years ago. Following Pierre, we're going to hear from Kevin Fisher. Kevin is the CEO of Sail Internet, and he spent his career revolutionizing high-speed internet access for consumers and businesses. He's received more than 20 US patents, and his team developed the core technology behind the 2-wire home portal routers deployed by AT&T and its Uverse. So look forward to kind of drilling into some of the technologies at play in the MDU space with Kevin and his colleagues on the panel. Following Kevin, we'll hear from Robert Gross, who is the president of World Cinema. And World Cinema, and Robert has been a leader in the institutional real estate and technology industries. He clarified for me that sometimes we use MTUs, multiple tenant units, instead of MDUs, multiple dwelling units. We're using the MDU, which is most common. But anyway, Robert's been working in this space for more than 25 years. He's committed to helping institutional real estate owners and managers create value from their real estate investments with technology that enhances. Lots in this space, right? I just think it's so cool to talk about real estate and technology together. And that's what we're hoping to get at here today. And then rounding out, batting cleanup in our discussion is Nicole Turner-Lee. Nicole, you've been a guest before. We're happy to have you back. She is the Senior Fellow in Governance Studies and director of the Center for Technology Innovation. The Center for Technology Innovation is really, I mean, it's just a kick-ass think tank. I mean, they're doing so much in broadband. Every time I turn around, I hear more about what Nicole and others at the Center for Technology Innovation have been doing. Nicole's portfolio includes research on public policies designed to enable equitable access for technology across the U.S. and really look forward to the work she's been doing in the MDU space. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it over to you, Pierre, to tell us a little bit about positron access and what life in the trenches looks like for positron.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you also to the other presenters, Kevin at Sail Internet, Robert at World Cinema, and Nicole that we're getting to know on this call. Positron has been around for a while, and also trenches refer to fiber trenches, and the fact that although it's not kind of straightforward to trench for fiber along a road, along a street in a given neighborhood, there is still a significant digital divide that results from the fact that fiber inside an MDU is difficult. It's expensive, it takes time, it requires resources for fiber splicing and all that are not readily available. And that to some extent, it actually increases the digital divide where now you have tenants with low-speed DSL or DOCSIS that are eager to sign up to a much better service, but simply cannot. So Positron developed a device we call a GAM. It's a G.hn access multiplexer, and basically G.hn is a technology that allows for the extension of fiber-based services into MDUs using the existing wiring, be it telephone pairs or coaxial cabling. And we brought on this panel Robert from the World Cinema, that are experts in doing G.hn over coaxial cabling, predominantly, whereas Kevin and his company, with Kevin's background on two-wire technology, also is very at ease using telephone pairs to deliver G.hn, and in both cases offering gigabit services to the tenants of these buildings. So the G.hn solution from Positron is also being updated, and we'll have some interesting news early into the new year with native XGS-PON capabilities. And that will allow seamless integration and management where the GAM will be looked at as a multi-port ONT. So I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to cover that in more details in the follow-up presentation. But doing this today allows for gigabit speeds to anyone the same way as if it was an Ethernet switch into a building. And that allows a great quality of experience, a great customer experience. And if you're the building owner, you don't have to face heavy construction work. There's no one comes with a hammer or a saw. You may need a screwdriver to mount our main unit on a wall, and that's about the extent of tunings that are required. So it helps to bring value into the building itself, but also better serve the tenants that deserve access to gigabit speeds. And what is interesting is when you do that, what is today a challenge, basically bringing gigabit to legacy brownfield buildings, becomes low-hanging fruits. It becomes as simple as serving a single family home. And that pretty much removes the excuse that says, well, because you have fiber in front of your MDU, doesn't mean automatically that you can get gigabit access. Now that we remove that complexity, that constraint, which helps also carriers. They can serve more customers. Customers are happier because they can get the service that they want, and everybody can kind of move away from this digital divide and become full digital citizens. So with that, I'll just conclude that we have been working with a number of nonprofit organizations. An interesting one is Project Waves in Maryland, where they are enabling low-income communities getting access to the internet at very low cost using this technology, and we're increasingly doing similar projects in other states and other large cities. So on that, I think I'll let Kevin take over from here. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. Good afternoon to those on the East Coast. So, so thank you very much, Drew and Pierre, for including Sail Internet in this seminar today. So a little bit about the company. So as mentioned, I've been in the broadband business for 20 some years, was involved in the early days of DSL, was heavily involved in the kind of AT&T Uverse deployment and similar deployments around the world. So Sail Internet, we started the company in 2015, and so we're a new kind of ISP. So we use a mix of technologies to solve problems for our customers. So we use a mix of fiber, wireless, and existing building wiring to deliver gigabit class broadband service to homes and businesses. So we're currently in the San Francisco Bay Area and the San Diego area and growing fast. We have thousands of customers. We're proud to say we're operating a 4 nines network and have been for the past, years. And so, people talk about 5 nines. That's really hard. I think 4 nines is very hard too when it comes to internet access. I suspect it's much better than the cable operator. So, so what we've identified, there's a big need for broadband in general, but there is especially a big need in what we're talking about today is MDU communities. And so there are a lot of communities in the Bay Area and in San Diego area that currently have either no high-speed providers or one high-speed provider. And that one high-speed provider is almost always the cable company. And so, there are reasons that some might want to subscribe to the cable company's offering, but many are looking for something different. They're doing video streaming. They're not looking for a cable TV package. So the challenge for a lot of these MDU buildings, unless they're brand new buildings, they don't have Cat5 cable and they don't have certainly don't have fiber to the unit. So we've needed to become innovative in how we distribute service inside the building, inside the community, building or buildings. And so we have settled on the positron solution for the buildings with older wiring. And like I said, most of these either have no high-speed providers today or one high-speed provider. And a number of these are affordable housing communities. So this is, that's a whole topic by itself. But we've gotten a number of calls from, let's say, desperate children saying, my mom's community doesn't have working internet. And she can't Zoom with the grandkids because she doesn't have a real internet connection. So that's an example of the kind of building that we're working with. So in most cases, we're in building distribution. So if there's Cat5 cable, great, we'll use it. If we can run fiber to the units cost effectively, we'll do that. But in older buildings, it's not really practical. So we have settled on the positron solution for in building distribution for gigabit type service. So I mean, they've been a good partner, a great partner for us. And so it's a very stable solution, and reliably we're providing gigabit service to the tenants. So we predominantly use the twisted pair. So even though there is coaxial cable in the building, a lot of the building owners would prefer for us to not, let's say, get involved in sharing access to the coaxial cable with the cable company. They may have, let's say, certain agreements that give the cable company exclusive access to the coax. So we found that it's a much easier solution for us, and we're very comfortable with the twisted pair. And so to just use twisted pair to distribute service, we don't interfere with the cable offerings and can provide great service. So that's a little bit of the high level about the company and what we're up to. So look forward to fielding any questions as we get into the panel.
Awesome. Again, well, let's get all these perspectives on the table, but the questions are piling up, at least with me, and we want to encourage our great group of people who are attending. Put your questions forward, particularly in the Zoom platform. They're easy to find, but we can get questions from any of the platforms that we're live on. Let's go ahead and turn the mic to Robert Gross. Tell us a little bit about World Cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Drew. So World Cinema has been in the prop tech space since before prop tech was a term. We've been in business since 1974, primarily in the hospitality space. We serve about 7,000 communities, about 900,000, 7,000 properties, about 900,000 hotel rooms in the US and outside of the US as well. Making great investments in trying to leverage technology to close the digital divide. Importance of the built environment space in terms of the occupants who live in the built environment, whether it's an apartment community, a senior housing community, a student housing community, or that our guests in hotels. Is the importance has grown over the years, and I think that's why we're here. Is there are two ways to actually get great broadband to a building and to an occupant of a building, and that is the hard and expensive way, which is overbuild and pull new either structured wiring or fiber optics to the endpoints inside of the building itself, or you can leverage technology. And I think we're talking today a lot about how do you leverage technology to use what's already there. It's less expensive, it's faster, and through great innovation, I think we're getting a high quality, and that's what Positron really offers. So myself, I've got a unique perspective. I've been in the business for over 25 years. Actually, it'll be 30 years come next year. So I'm dating myself, but I was in the multifamily management space on the technology side in the early 90s. Saw the first .com boom and was attracted to the tech space. Moved to San Francisco, the Bay Area, in the late 90s. Got some experience with some really innovative broadband companies. This is when broadband was first emerging as a real thing, and have kind of been in this space ever since. So proud to be here, glad to be here. I look forward to the questions.
Well, and I really appreciate the way, Robert, that you've highlighted the two ways to get better broadband to MDUs: the hard and expensive way, or the easier way. And so again, we certainly want to talk about those because the cost is kind of always an issue, right? That is one of the reasons that makes it's so hard to get good access to broadband. I'm also certainly interested in understanding more about the type of bandwidth capacity that you get. Robert, can I trouble you to just say something more about what kind of bandwidth you can get on this kind of solution that's, as you say, so much cheaper than having to pull all that fiber through every unit?
Yeah, I think there's a theoretical answer to that, and there's a practical answer. I think that our goal is to try to push a gigabit symmetrical to the endpoint, to the user. And with the G.hn solution, it's very possible to do that. I think in terms of lab testing, I think Pierre probably could address that better, but I think there's a little bit greater throughput you can achieve through that. It all depends upon, of course, the situation and the existing wiring, the type of building. You're also dependent upon the capacity coming to the building. And I know, Kevin, you've done some interesting stuff with millimeter wave and fixed wireless, pushing bandwidth throughout a municipality in a very cost-effective and fast way. I think we're going to delve into that a bit more. But the goal is gigabit, right? And the goal is symmetrical, and the goal is highly reliable. And that's what we're seeing out of this technology. Like I said, you can get there with other technologies too, but we're going to talk about the G.hn space today. So
great. Well, again, what we're gonna drill in more here, and thank you for giving us that higher level perspective on some of the obstacles. Let's turn now to our final panelist, Nicole Turner-Lee. Nicole, tell us a little bit about your focus on the MDU space and some of the issues that you see in getting higher quality broadband to MDU environment.
Thank you, Drew, for having me. And I'm going to actually tag on to my friend Robert here. So Robert said he's dating himself. I'm going to go a little further and sort of stick with him on the dating himself. So what's so interesting, when I kind of barged my way onto this panel with Drew, I've been working in the MDU space since the early 2000s. In fact, I worked with several MDUs to actually institute at that time. I was working with a company called One Economy, an Akamai solution where we're doing Wi-Fi in MDU units. I also worked to change housing policy so that we made sure the property managers and developers had the money to actually convert Ethernet connections within actual units to be able to provision some type of broadband. And most recently, after that, sometimes in the late 90s, when the TOP program came out, I actually instituted a wireless network in a community called North Lawndale in Chicago, where we actually installed D-Link routers into MDUs so that we actually created some type of internet access. So I'm very familiar and I can hang with this group, just so you know, because I've actually built a network, or I actually was part of instituting some ways to bring networks into multi-unit apartments, particularly affordable housing. With that being said, currently what's so interesting about this conversation we're having now is that things haven't changed. We still have the challenges of getting broadband access into multi-dwelling units. And in particular, we have the challenge because, as Robert and others have said, we're dealing with two stocks of housing. We're dealing with housing that was built pretty much before broadband systems were actually instituted in the way that they can propagate, now much better through concrete walls and ceilings. But back in the day, it was very hard to distinguish the type of quality of the particular building that you were retrofitting, which now makes it so much cheaper, Drew, to your last question, to do it in new housing. The challenge, however, we talk about wiring MDUs, is that we still don't have the funding streams. Not only do we have these challenges with the multiplicity of technology options that are fundable within some of the funding streams that we rely upon for new or existing developments, we also have these conversations on how do you pay for it? And where do you pass some of those charges on to actually upgrade and maintain those networks? So I find this to be very interesting, right? Because I think at the heart of it, it's been interesting to hear this community talk about the digital divide. This is something I've worked on. I've got a book coming out on the digital divide next year. Part of what the challenge is in closing the digital divide is not just building it so people will come, but making sure that when you build it, people are maintaining that service in some way or form to be able to live a quality of life. And part of the work that I do now, I just finished up a report with a nonprofit affordable housing builder, is how do you get the conjoining of the type of work we're trying to do to actually meet the techno requirements of whatever technology is going to be best suited for that development. But how do we also get the residents, the property manager, the community, the other actors to be equally invested in that particular investment that we're making as developers? So I'm hoping as we have this conversation, we'll sort of combine two. Closing the divide, yes, is making sure that we have every spot connected. And I'm a huge fan that housing is part of the ecosystem. Just as schools and libraries, we've got to make sure our housing units are connected. Do you know how many people were passed over during the pandemic simply because we didn't have the right and relevant connectivity that existed in multi-dwelling units? The other thing I'm a huge fan of is closing the divide means that as we negotiate through old rules and new rules, that we understand that having connectivity in America is so relevant. It's relevant to our ability to get a job, healthcare, education, communicate with family and friends. And so I always pat many of the folks on the back who are on this call and the work that Drew is doing, because this requires an all hands on deck strategy. But it really requires, in the case of housing, people like you who can dig their feet into the type of technological solutions that make sense and the type of autonomy of technology that we need to institute, particularly as we look at the situation in which we're actually encountering to wire in communities. So I'll stop there because I'm like a preacher. Just get ready for it. Again, broadband is my life, but in particular, I'm excited to be here because I do think, again, housing is a main and critical point of the ecosystem that we have in communities. And so we have to figure out ways to do this effectively, cost-wise and community-wise.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this perspective to our discussion, Nicole. I'm struck by like two kind of big issues, and let me just throw both of these out here for all the panelists to weigh in on. One is the sort of the technological challenge, right? We all know we ultimately want fiber. We certainly need fiber to the MDU. And then while we want to get it to the every unit, right? Sometimes you can't because of the in-building systems. And that's where, and I was struck by the point that I think it was Kevin, you raised about sometimes twisted pair is preferable to coax, which gets to the second issue, which is the issue of contracts, right? And these, like when we're trying to get broadband to homes, to residential single family homes, you've got the provider and you've got the customer, and there's enough kind of contention just between those two parties. But when we're talking about the MDU space, there's like a whole new party, right? And what is that role of that real estate owner? Are they like a supporter? Are they hindrance? Are they like bribed off by an entity with a provider? I mean, and then we get into controversies, and we've had these before. We've had discussions on Broadband Breakfast Live online. I think this was one, Pierre, you were in, where we talked about the FCC's order on multiple dwelling units and competition. So we may or may not get into that a lot. But the point I'm getting at here is, and this is kind of well summarized by a question that was raised here by Corey Hayes, which is, are you seeing MDU contracts structured over existing wiring infrastructure, right? So I guess this kind of goes to, do you need to use the coax? Do you need to avoid the coax? Do you need to use the twisted paper? So let's talk about both the technology and the legal construct of those contracts with the MDU owners. So who would like to tackle that series of two questions first?
I can take a bit of a crack at it, but maybe others would have some perspective on it. But I think for the building owner that so up until recently, the cable operator was the primary provider to the building. And so we're coming in, bringing choice, bringing a second option. And so especially in apartments, the building owner is, they may have reasons for not wanting to disrupt that relationship. They want choice, but they also don't, they don't want to create problems, whether it's contractual or concerns about the service quality for the tenants who want to continue using the coaxial cable. So the ability to use the twisted pair, which has become basically obsolete otherwise, is a benefit that the positron solution will work well over twisted pair. And in many cases, there are two pairs going to each unit. So we have some, let's say, redundancy. We can even use both pairs. So these are very short reach applications, 100 meters or so, and so that we can get reliable high-speed service over. So maybe Pierre has some more to add to that. So
yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we see also a change in attitude due to the FCC ruling of last February. Actually, we had some cable operators come to us worried that their plans to put fiber with this exclusive wiring agreement, where they could basically have 10 years payback guarantee, that they're worried now that the moment they put fiber, anyone else can use it. So that prompted more interest in finding ways to reuse the in-building wiring. And there's a concern, and I'm sure there's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there's litigation around whether the FCC has the right to make that ruling or not. But there's also plain old litigation, I think, that is due to mostly to education, that the cable guy will come back and just say, what is this? And start disconnecting devices that are on the coax, although they have no right to do that. What we've learned, though, is most buildings in MDUs, not the same in hotels, but in MDUs, it's mostly home runs to everyone. And therefore, you can disconnect someone from the cable TV feed and connect them to G.hn without any concerns. And we're starting to see cases where people says, well, we want to keep linear TV. There are still people watching linear TV, and a good way to get that is also through their cable provider, but they want better than DOCSIS. So we found technical ways to work around this, but I think there's a bit of knowledge sharing and training and awareness that needs to be given to the community at large to really take advantage of the FCC ruling. There's still a bit of ignorance on that front.
Yeah,
So,
if I can interject
please.
real quick. Yeah, sorry, Drew.
No.
I think that we could probably have a 2-hour session on just the inside wire rules and the regulatory environment, and go municipality by municipality, state by state, contract by contract, even in terms of what can or cannot be done and what should or should not be done. I think at the end of the day, awareness is probably our most powerful thing that we could promote. And that's awareness of the property owners in terms of how important connectivity is to the lives of the occupants of their buildings. And even in a multi-tenant environment, the tenants and office tenants, but we're talking more about residential here, and I think we should. But considering what we do as an asset and an important asset, just like the plumbing system and the roof of the building, we are as important as those things. Connectivity is today. And with connectivity, that's how you force these property owners to make the right decisions and make sure that their occupants and their residents are being best served for the best price point and the most reliable source. And frankly, making sure that connectivity is available everywhere in the community. You can get into the world of managed Wi-Fi, for example, which depends upon a good, solid core network. Those things are very, very important. I think awareness is the number one thing, making this conversation really about a digital asset, that the digital infrastructure is a true asset, and they should be managing that asset and paying attention to it like they would any other part of their building. So I think that's the most important part of any conversation to have. And like I said, we get into regulatory stuff all day long. So, but I love to. Yeah, Nicole?
Yeah, I want to jump in too, because I think part of what I've seen in my recent research too, when it comes to property managers, they're still somewhat stuck on the paradigm of it's all about the building itself and not necessarily the connectivity. And so what you often see is that property managers look at connectivity sometimes as a risk in their equation, right? Like if we put it in, I often hear property managers often say to me, who's going to pay for it? And they want to pass that cost on to the consumer without seeing how broadband has become universal to real estate for many occupants who are deciding to either rent or buy. And so I think part of the challenge is, and this has been an age-old challenge outside of the regulation, is getting property managers to understand that the whole development space is all about improved community and ecosystems, and how they actually frame those ecosystems. To the point that Robert made, like there was a period of time that trying to get property managers, when we were working in the 90s, and then the stuff that, till now, trying to get property managers to understand that managed Wi-Fi networks were actually also a positive attribute to the system. I commonly argue in my research, what would have happened if we had properties that actually had Wi-Fi for the more than 50 million students that were sent home from school? How many of those kids and many of those property developments, for example, that are federally assisted, could have actually gone to open spaces to do their homework, as opposed to sitting on the stoops of libraries, libraries, and Taco Bells? So part of it is, again, getting housing developers and those of us talking about this to really see broadband as a critical, and I like the way Robert's talked about it. I talk about it as a digital asset in the ecosystem, part of the infrastructure of communities, but getting folks to see that this is a community infrastructure that you're building that allows for so much more potential. And it also is a factor that reduces risk for quality of life factors for some of the residents, because it makes them less vulnerable and fragile to some of the more online systems versus analog systems that they have to actually certify with. So wanted to put that out there as well.
No, thank you. Kevin, did you want to chime back in? I thought you were raising your hand earlier.
Oh, sorry. No, well, I mean, no, I was just going to comment that I think the issue about the FCC ruling and regulations and usage of the coax, that's going to sort itself out. But just in the short run, what we've seen is it's an easier conversation to get something done fast if we say we'll just use the twisted pair. That was my comment.
Right. All right. We've got a boatload of great questions, and let's go to some of them and encourage more here. So one by Reg Weiser of Positron Access, he asks, how easily and quickly can the gigabit access multiplexer be installed to provide the high bandwidth symmetrical broadband? So let's talk about the speed component, right? Do you want to speak to that, Robert or Kevin?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's as easy as installing a Ethernet switch. And assuming the infrastructure is in place and it's well configured and an endpoint, it's as quickly as you can possibly move. So I think there is a component of the install that has you focused on the infrastructure, the physical either twisted pair or the coax cable, making sure that connections are well established, that there's not too many endpoints that can be established, or there's not too many endpoints that are needed on a looped wiring solution, which you don't get with twisted pair as much as you do with coax. but it's not a complicated or complex install.
So what's the time? What's the time component there? How long?
It depends on the community, but you can do an IDF in a matter of hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a whole, we've built out a whole, building in a week or less. So it's a matter of days.
Mm-hmm. Bruce Wolf asks, I think he's referring to the whole issue of the FCC's order on multi-tenant properties. Well, then, how do we convince the political state to not be distracted by the incumbent franchisees? You all know the situation here in San Francisco Bay Area. Obviously, it was in San Francisco that there was an ordinance that kind of kicked off a lot of this discussion. Who else would like to comment on this question of, again, we don't necessarily need to take all time to talk about this, but who would like to react to Bruce's question here?
So I'm here in the Bay Area. I mean, I think maybe you're referring to San Francisco Article 52.
Yes.
Maybe. So what's interesting is that it's helped move some discussions along with some property owners. But like as a company, we're looking for a partnership, a cooperative solution. So I think it's more a tool to help bring them to the table than, it's like the minute you go the legal route, then it kind of changes the relationship with the owner. So my 2 cents.
Sean Gerner, has a question. Let me ask it to you, Pierre. Has anyone on the panel leveraged positron GHN to implement managed Wi-Fi in a brownfield MDU, enabling an active Ethernet network with wireless access points? If so, can you elaborate on that project? Pierre?
Yeah, that's actually becoming one of the key driver as the people go along with broadband connectivity. We see kind of 3 steps. First step is, okay, connectivity to every tenant. Then the next problem says, okay, now if the tenants are left to their own devices, literally, and pick the Wi-Fi router that is on sale at Walmart on a given day, they'll have all kinds of issues. So there's a second step that usually comes from the building ownership and also the operator, whoever is providing the service, to say we need to take ownership of the Wi-Fi environment. And there are some really interesting things. I'll say Positron is having technology partnerships with all of the leading Wi-Fi vendors. So Aruba, Ruckus, Cisco, Meraki. We're talking with others also that are making some interesting headways. They all have great ways to enable Wi-Fi across multiple access points and make sure that all interference, seamless mobility, all that takes place. And that brings about then an infrastructure that can turn a building into a smart building, because all of these solutions have IoT capabilities. And then we have some partners that have done really interesting applications to let people control not only their apartment as if it was a smart home, but also do things in the building. Some are having larger buildings with, say, a few charging stations for their electric cars. You can book time of the day where you can go get your car charged, access to meeting rooms. You want to get your family over for the holidays. You need you have a single bedroom apartment, so you need a larger room that you can book it. So all kind of other amenities that make life that much easier because there's this overall synchronized infrastructure. So we see that increasingly happening, and it's becoming high on the list of people that are looking at our solution and say, well, can you enable managed Wi-Fi? And indeed, we do enable that.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about this smart
Yes.
building. And first of all, is smart buildings a synonym with managed Wi-Fi or not? And then secondly, does smart building or managed Wi-Fi mean that you need to have just one provider, or can there still be multiple providers? So let's just kind of hear what others think about the smart building issue and or managed Wi-Fi issue. Nicole.
Yeah, no, if I can speak on that. So I just got back from Barcelona from the Smart City Expo. And so one of the things that was so interesting was how cities in particular are leveraging smart capacities. And one of the areas that we're seeing across the world are smart buildings. So I really appreciate Pierre's comment because it had me thinking about, to your point, Drew, there's two conversations here. One is the technical conversation. I think it's really clear in this day and age that there is not one size fits all in terms of solution. And I think whatever we do regulatory, whatever we do in terms of the practical business solutions that we're actually putting out there in the marketplace, not one size is going to fit all, the same way that we're finding that not one technology is going to be the most amenable technology based on some of the building challenges. I like what we talk about, the situational challenges actually dictate what technology may work better. I've visited places in Hartford, Connecticut, where there's just no way that they're actually bringing Wi-Fi into some of these places because of the building structure. So I want to keep reiterating that I see that when I actually try to suggest to people retrofitting. But I like what you're talking about and what Pierre brought up in terms of smart cities. And this goes back to what is the where for all, what's the incentive for property managers to want more connectivity within their buildings? And then I'll just end up with, I think, a challenge that we all have to just keep considering. First and foremost, you do want your residents to be very much fully integrated, even if they're not a subscriber in the home, with the services that come with a smart building. Whether it's energy management and consumption, whether it's booking your in a senior assisted housing MDU, booking your Metro Transit to be able to pick you up. We're going to find people, particularly in affordable housing, have different entry points into the ecosystem, where it's actually smarter for us as providers to think about multi-layers of how we bring connectivity. I also talk about something called digital parks, moving from parking lots to parks and being able to envelop the community spaces where people are congregating. I want to go back to Robert for a second. Hotels play a significant role in certain communities when it comes to connectivity. I know I was headed to Marion, Alabama, and I had to pull up at a hotel to use their Wi-Fi because I could not get my system to work to tell me where I was going or the person I was supposed to talk to. I share that because I think, Drew, to your point, we have to begin to think about as MDUs that we are moving beyond brick and mortar to connectivity solutions that are going to require these questions if we think about the next iteration of the property management and development space. And I continue to reiterate with my colleagues, and I'll wrap up here, part of the challenge is educating the property owners and the people responsible for investing beyond the brick and mortar. And honestly, bringing in the providers that give services to the building can help as well. Many of those folks are dictating to property owners things that they want to do within their building. And they also need to be part of this connectivity process. What Drew's referencing, a report I'll be putting out soon, we actually talked to a large footprint of a nonprofit affordable housing development. 6 cities or 4 cities, 4 different people who all had 4 different ideas of how they wanted broadband to be used. So I think going forward, you're so right, Drew. We're on the cusp of talking about MDU in another context that is way beyond this conversation we're having today.
So Kevin and Robert, what are some of your thoughts on the smart buildings or managed Wi-Fi discussions?
I'll take it first, Kevin. I think that it's just another additive value creator for what we do for digital infrastructure, right? Another use case, another application. And frankly, I think it could end up being the more valuable of the applications. The built environment today produces 40% of the carbon output, right? So when you talk about saving the planet, if you will, right? There are things that technology can do to help conserve energy, to help reduce the carbon footprint of the built environment. And those things are difficult to measure, except for, you can measure how much you pay in an electricity bill or how much you pay in an oil or gas bill. And building owners are really, really interested in that. They're interested in becoming more cost efficient, right? And that is right along with the whole smart community thing. Awareness of where devices are. You've got public safety things that are very, very important. We started talking about just being connected, so you can get on a Zoom call or you can surf the web. But I think it goes far beyond that, and I think we're seeing that in all kinds of building types, whether it's hotels or apartments, all the way through the value chain. So I do think awareness, though, of the building owner looking at this as an asset and not just a thing that they want to contract out is very, very important. And Nicole said it earlier, where where the building owners used to say, well, this, if I do this, is this going to be something else I have to worry about managing? We're way beyond that because they have to worry about managing it now.
So let me just unpack. We had an earlier question by Corey Hayes, and I just want to, which I mentioned, but he went into more detail, like how are each of you seeing MDU contracts structured over existing wire with regard to bulk, with regard to retail, with regard to marketing rights? Are there changes? Like, for instance, Robert, you just talked about the change from burden to benefit, right? Well, how is that reflected in the contractual agreements over existing wiring? Robert or Kevin?
So let me jump in. First, I want to touch briefly on the whole smart building point. So we were doing a number of these managed Wi-Fi contracts over the last year or so. There's a lot of it's the trend in multifamily housing. And so what's interesting is we go in there and it turns out the building owner, their needs are much greater than just managed Wi-Fi. So when we spec it out, we talk about number of access points, also number of fixed access IoT connections they might have. So in that it tends to, in this gets to also the contract side. So it tends to be more of, call it an opt-out model where so we're blanketing the whole property with Wi-Fi and then using Positron and other types of solutions. If a tenant wants to use the cable company, they can, but it's sort of like they have to opt out. So the default is that they're using the cradle to grave Wi-Fi experience through the whole property. And so now you had a question about the contract side?
Well, specifically, like going from burden to asset, right? How does that inform the agreements about exclusive or not exclusive? What, like, I don't know, maybe Pierre, you could speak to this issue. How do you view this as you try to go to building owners and say, hey, there's an easier way than tearing up every building and bringing fiber to each unit? Once you got fiber, you can do all X, Y, and Z. What are some of the issues that you run into on the contract side, Pierre?
Yeah, we don't usually get involved in the contract. That's done with operators like World Cinema, Cell, and others. But what I'd like to just point to Nicole, the building structure is not always conducive to what I would call corridor Wi-Fi. The way hotels have been done up until recently, we see a big change where there's in apartment Wi-Fi, where everyone get their Wi-Fi bubble, and then the idea is complemented with public Wi-Fi in a way that you can leave that bubble, the comfort of your couch, go to a shared area, maybe there's a work area, a study area, whatever, but you remain into your extended Wi-Fi bubble. So there are different techniques to achieve that over Wi-Fi, and what you need is a solid in-building infrastructure. And the other thing that we see from building owners, when they come to us and says, if I put your technology in my building, am I limited in the nature of the contract or the type of services I can offer? That's the biggest concern. Then there are situations like open access. Well, the technology is conducive to open access. So if a community, there's a city offer that complements the offer from an incumbent, for instance, well, they can share the same infrastructure that we bring about with the GAM. We're like an Ethernet switch, as Robert kind of made a reference. So that gives options to the building owner to really have their infrastructure existing there to make it a real asset. They increase the value of the building significantly by raising what is already there paid for.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk about contracts for just a second.
Yeah, please do, Robert.
So the way we look at it is really there's two different commercial components to doing what we do. One of them is the building of the network itself and dictating who owns the network and who controls the network. And we promote that the building owner should be the owner of the network and really to the benefit of their occupants, manage what happens there. That's an opinion more than anything else. But the first commercial contract is really who builds and who owns the network. The second commercial contract is who's going to manage it. And Nicole in the chat just said, security and privacy, those are issues that have to be addressed in that commercial agreement. And you have to choose someone that knows what they're doing. Like, I logged into a network on a trip I took last week, and it was a very large hotel, and it was in the clear. Like you could see everything that's going on. That's not good management. And you've got to be aware of that, right? You want to have the ability to authenticate devices and users. You want to have someone who is 24/7 worrying about, that's not a good word. You should just relax, like Nicole has sign in the back.
Right.
But managing what happens on the network, and that's a whole different commercial agreement. It involves real service level agreements. It involves some level of sophistication that allows you to say, okay, we've got someone looking over this network. And it's an area that is a great question. I love that question because so often it is just put in the background and it just happens and it doesn't happen the right way. If we're going to really look at this thing as an asset and look at this thing for the next 100 years and how it's impacting people's lives, you have to have some seriousness about how you commercialize these things.
And Pierre has made a comment here about how the gigabit access multiplexer is fully encrypted communications, right? Getting at this issue.
But obviously you have to make sure that Wi-Fi is also properly encrypted, because otherwise
I was going to say the Wi-Fi has to be encrypted too, right?
Yeah,
of course.
But to Robert's point, I'm sure, Kevin, you do the same thing. When it's done properly, it works great. But also you have to be smart on how you do this. Don't let the amateurs, if I could call it like that, try to and take over, get the brother-in-law to say, oh no, I'll get your Wi-Fi in the building. Not necessarily.
Right.
And Drew, one other thing real quick, I know I'll be really, really short. I think consumers or the actual residents play a significant role here as well, because the other thing I would actually advise on my history working in this space is that we can build it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people will come. And so having the aligned marketing where you're able to talk about these services or they're not embedded behind other contracts allows you to also have some transparency with residents who are also, if you mess up the consumer trust of a resident on that network, you might as well forget about it, right? Because as Robert said, they're not going to use particular parts of the ecosystem because they may think that their trust is being violated or their data collected or they're being surveilled. So just being careful that you're also not emboldening the property managers to get the connectivity for their purposes only and not recognizing the type of trust that they need to instill in the residents as well.
Well, our time's running to an end. There's one more topic I absolutely want to get, and I also want to give everyone a chance to offer some closing thoughts. So I'm going to ask the question, and if you'd care in your final comments, you can address it. We'll go in the same order we started in. This is Wim Hemsworth's question. Has anyone found a way to structure individual internet subscriptions in MDUs so as to use the Affordable Connectivity Program discounts for low-income households? Great question, Win. Thank you for asking it. And so, Pierre, and then again, Kevin, Robert, and Nicole, that question or anything else that you would like to address in conclusion.
Yeah, so we do have a number of partners that are focused on low-income buildings, and they do definitely take advantage of the ACP capabilities to offer almost free internet access to the tenants because of the lower cost of the infrastructure and their ability with that and some of the other grants from the government at all levels to offer almost free internet access, at least for a basic package, to their tenants.
So we make extensive use of ACP. So what's interesting is in affordable housing, the residents often have other problems than just the internet access. So a managed Wi-Fi type solution may work better so that so they're going direct to device and they're not in a position where they have to manage a router and figure out Ethernet cables. And so this is an area that's occurred to us. We want to work with property owners, as you said, provide basically free service. So if there's a managed Wi-Fi opportunity that involves the vast majority of the units, the math works. The $30 a month ACP math, if the 80 or 90% of the tenants opt in with the help of the property owner, we have a great opportunity in multifamily affordable housing.
Anything else that you'd like to say in conclusion there, Kevin, Robert, and Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, and I agree with what Kevin said, and what Pierre have said. But listen, I just think when we have this conversation again, that MDUs need to be a part of the universal service reform conversations, because I think more money needs to go directly to property managers who want to be able to do this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think managed Wi-Fi is a hot growing area in the multifamily space, and it solves a lot of problems for the tenants, the property owners. And it's kind of a win-win solution. The potentially the property owner can own the infrastructure. They control their destiny. And so there are kind of models, financial models that can make that work.
Right. Although the only thing I would add on to Kevin, and this goes back to like Robert dated himself back in the early 90s, Ray Ramsey used to tell us at One Economy, people want to do private transactions within the comfort of their home. So we also have to be careful that we're not creating public Wi-Fi in MDUs where people have to search their HIV status or their COVID vaccination status in the hallway of the building. We just we have to figure out how to humanize this so we can bring
Nicole, you bring up a very good good point. Just as a company, and I think others are subscribing to this, we have a privacy policy, right? We do not look where our tenants, our customers search. The traffic is encrypted. We're like, we don't keep track of it. This is a huge selling point. Right. As compared to some of the bigger operators.
But let's give Robert a chance to offer his final thoughts.
Yeah, it has to be a quality network experience, and quality means private and secure and reliable and fast. So you've got all those levers, right? We were talking about the role of the property owner, and I just want to close at least my portion by saying the property owner should have their interests aligned with their residents. And if they don't, they're not going to be a great property owner. And if there are property owners signing bad agreements, we've got to do something about that. But the property owner, the property owners I've been involved with have always looked after the best interest of their residents and tried to do the right thing. But I agree there should be some we need to get the property owner to think of this as an asset, as a true asset, just like the roof, right?
Well, and there's probably some education that needs to take place in general as to what they can do with their asset, because it's a golden asset that they have.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderfully rich discussion. Thank you for being with us. Don't miss our next event on telehealth robots, as well as the event the next week on the best stories of 2022 and the Consumer Electronics Show in 2023. And also, don't miss the 12 days of broadband. Come back to Broadband Breakfast to see what they are and to join the Broadband Breakfast Club. On behalf of our wonderful panelists, Pierre Trudeau, Kevin Fisher, Robert Gross, and Nicole Turner-Lee, I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, everybody.